The summer of 2025 felt like a world holding its breath. Tensions spanned continents, fueled by relentless news and the aggressive posturing of world leaders. At the center stood U.S. President Donald Trump, back in the White House, determined to project American power. His alliance with Israel's Prime Minister, Netanyahu, was more than political. It was a shared belief in decisive, unilateral action. The Middle East, already volatile, became the stage for this show of force. Warnings about Iran's nuclear ambitions grew louder, and a preemptive strike seemed inevitable. Diplomatic channels frayed, replaced by the language of war. The world braced for the first domino to fall. On June 13, 2025, the world was jolted awake as silence shattered in the dead of night. The air was pierced by sirens and the distant thunder of explosions, signaling the beginning of a conflict that would reshape the Middle East. Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a massive, meticulously planned air assault on Iran. Fighter jets roared into the sky, unleashing a barrage of missiles aimed at crippling Iran's most sensitive and strategic sites. US-supplied bombers and advanced missiles joined the assault, targeting Iran's nuclear facilities and the heart of its military command. The operation was a display of overwhelming force and technological superiority. In Iran, chaos erupted as air defenses scrambled to respond. Civilians rushed to shelters and emergency teams mobilized in the face of devastation. The attack was swift and devastating, igniting a deadly exchange of strikes between Israel and Iran. Missiles lit up the night sky as both sides retaliated, plunging the region into uncertainty. The US provided not just weapons but real-time intelligence and strategic support. Its involvement was undeniable, and the world watched as American influence shaped the course of battle. After nearly 2 weeks of escalating violence and mounting casualties, President Trump authorized direct American strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, dramatically raising the stakes. The official line was clear: to end Iran's nuclear threat and restore stability. But behind the rhetoric, the world braced for the consequences of such bold action. The reality was far more complex. A regional war had erupted into a global crisis, with oil markets in turmoil and nations scrambling to respond. With much of Iran's infrastructure in ruins and humanitarian disaster looming, Trump declared a ceasefire, casting himself as a peacemaker on the world stage. But this was no true peace, only a fragile pause. Grief, anger, and the thirst for revenge simmered on both sides, threatening to reignite the conflict at any moment. The world had crossed a line, and the embers of conflict promised more devastation. Diplomats scrambled, but the damage was done. The fires were out, but the war was far from over. The scars of this night would shape the future, as the world waited for what would come next. As the bombs stopped, a new battle began, a war of narratives. Trump and his team claimed total victory, boasting that Iran's nuclear program was destroyed. Intelligence agencies quietly disagreed, suggesting the damage was temporary. The US government argued with itself, exposing deep politicization of intelligence. Israel echoed America's triumph, while Iran's leaders insisted their resolve was unbroken. Iran expelled UN nuclear inspectors, plunging its program into secrecy. The world was left with propaganda, not facts. The IAEA was blind, and the truth lost in the fog of spin. The war for the narrative had just begun. While leaders debated policy and strategy in distant halls, the true cost of conflict was counted not in speeches, but in lives lost and families shattered. Every explosion, every missile strike, left behind a trail of grief and devastation that statistics could never fully capture. Iranian officials reported over 600 killed and thousands wounded. Among the dead were not only civilians but also top scientists and security officials, a loss that rippled through the nation's sense of security and progress. In Israel, missile attacks killed dozens and injured over 1,000, forcing mass evacuations and leaving entire neighborhoods scarred. The constant threat of violence upended daily life as families fled their homes in search of safety. Civilians on both sides lived in fear, their homes turned into battlegrounds. Ordinary people caught in the crossfire faced sleepless nights and uncertain tomorrows, never knowing when the next attack would come. Meanwhile, Gaza's humanitarian crisis deepened, tens of thousands dead, starvation rampant, and basic necessities growing ever more scarce. Aid workers struggled to reach those in need, as families endured unimaginable hardship. The suffering was universal, the trauma deepening with every strike. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded, and children's cries echoed through shattered streets, leaving scars that would last for generations. Each act of aggression planted seeds for future violence, fueling anger and despair. The pain of loss became a rallying cry, perpetuating a cycle that seemed impossible to break. Leaders spoke of strategy and national interest, but on the ground, the only currency was human life. The gap between rhetoric and reality grew wider with every passing day. The region was trapped in a relentless cycle of pain and retribution, as families fled with little more than hope, and new rounds of violence threatened any chance for peace. The human cost was immeasurable, echoing in every ruined building and every tear shed for the lost. In Washington, debate over the war was detached, even surreal. Politicians argued over trivialities, ignoring the real consequences. The arrogance echoed the lead-up to Iraq in 2003. Flawed intelligence, promises of quick victory. But Iran is not Iraq. It's larger, more advanced, and capable of fierce retaliation. History warns that wars are easy to start, impossible to control. The ghosts of past conflicts, World War I, Vietnam, Afghanistan, haunt every decision. The stakes now are higher. Nuclear arms, global collapse, even human extinction. The lessons of history are urgent warnings, but our leaders seem determined to ignore them. We are racing toward disaster, blind to the cliff ahead. We stand on a precipice, the ceasefire a fragile pause, not a resolution. The world holds its breath, uncertain if this is a fleeting moment of calm or the silence before a greater storm. Every decision made now carries the weight of history, and the consequences could echo for generations. Israel prepares for more conflict. Regional tensions simmer. The streets are tense, families brace for the worst, and the sense of unease is palpable. Across borders, neighbors watch with dread, knowing that any spark could ignite a wider inferno. Propaganda machines in every capital prime populations for the next round. Fear and anger are stoked, narratives sharpened, and the drums of war beat louder in living rooms and public squares alike. War is not over, it's reloading. Armies regroup, weapons are readied, and the machinery of conflict grinds on, indifferent to the suffering it leaves behind. Leaders mistake bluster for strength, ignoring the catastrophic human cost. Their rhetoric grows harsher, while ordinary people pay the price in blood and loss. The U.S. Senate surrenders its power to check war, and the world's institutions seem paralyzed. The very bodies meant to safeguard peace now stand by, powerless or unwilling to intervene. We witness a systemic failure of the safeguards meant to prevent catastrophe. The mechanisms built to protect humanity falter, leaving us exposed to the consequences of unchecked aggression. The question now, is this how the next world war begins? Not with a single spark, but with relentless escalation. Each day brings new provocations, and the world edges closer to the abyss. If we keep following leaders who ignore history's warnings, millions will die. The lessons of the past are clear, yet we seem doomed to repeat them, sacrificing innocent lives for pride and power. Is this the future we choose? Or can we find the courage to change course before it's too late?